Welcome to today's video, everybody. We're going to talk about some of the breaking news coming out of Iran. Very interesting situation over there with the talks having started between the US and Iran. Supposedly some productivity happening there, but that's coming amidst some of these headlines. Leave Iran now is what the US is giving an urgent warning to American citizens that are in Iran, telling them to leave. And that's while these talks are taking place. And then additionally, Trump has said to the Ayatollah that he should be worried amidst that major military buildup in the Middle East. And then Iran obviously is going to have hardcore deterrence of their own, saying that they're ready for an all-out conflict and that it will be a geographical war is what the Ayatollah is saying. That's the rhetoric coming out of the Ayatollah. And what that means is essentially bringing in proxies, and we'll get to that here a little bit later in the video. We'll talk about some of the tech and the systems that the US could throw at this problem should things go off the rails and go hot. Because at this point, all bets are off. We don't know which direction this could go. Now, it's nice that the talks are happening, but why are the talks only focused on nuclear weapons when it's pretty clear at this point that the regime isn't afraid to kill thousands of their people? So that's a very interesting situation, right? Where the regime is like, yeah, we'll have discussions with you. We'll have these talks in good faith, but we don't want to talk about the fact that we just killed thousands of our own people. It's very, very interesting bargaining position. But again, that's what we've been seeing out of the Ayatollah for decades. Essentially kill your way out of any situation. But the indirect talks in Oman are the big wild card right now. The US and Iran are sitting down through mediators and they're trying to hash out mainly the nuclear stuff. That's the focus right now. It looks like the Trump administration is pushing hard for zero uranium enrichment, basically wiping out Iran's program, not only military, but also the civilian side of their refinement program. And then Iran's foreign minister, Agarachi, has said that this is a good start so far, but insists they're only chatting nukes. So he's basically reassuring his buddy, the Ayatollah, who's back at home. He's like, don't worry, Ayatollah. We're making sure that we can still kill protesters. Don't worry. We'll make sure that's still on the table. Because Iran knows if they make some deal where they say we won't kill our protesters, they're going to go back on it eventually. And then the US would then have the ability to go in and do strikes, do those preemptive strikes because they're violating some sort of an agreement. So they don't want to agree to anything related to any internal measures. They only want to talk about something that's external and affects the broader countries in the region and the broader countries of the world, which is the nuclear program. So they don't want to chat about their proxies. Proxies? What proxies? Iran's like, we don't have any proxies, but they want to see what can happen if they come to the table with preventing a strike from the US. That's kind of the number one thing that I'm seeing right now. The Ayatollah is trying to do everything he can to mitigate a strike coming in. So they don't want to have the regime fall. That's the number one goal. But potentially Iran could walk away because of the zero enrichment demand. Maybe that's something that they're just not willing to go with. And that could trigger some sort of regional chaos, again, with Iran threatening that it would be a geographical war, bringing in their neighbors as well. But the focus here so far seems to be laser sharp on nuclear weapons because, again, the nuclear program was set back. How far was it set back? During those strikes during the 12-day war, we don't know exactly. If it was my guess, I would say months. Maybe 6 to 12 months set back. Could be longer than that, especially using the actual facilities themselves, like using Fordo, Natanz, hitting those vent shafts, basically striking deep into those shafts to keep them from being rebuilt is going to be a very tough problem for Iran to solve, but they're going to just start right away. That's their goal. Continuously try to use that for leverage against the international community. That's the big thing that they're doing right there. And then again, no talks about the crackdowns. They don't want to talk about the crackdowns or any type of internal matters. That's their number one focus. But let's go ahead and flip to what could happen if Iran gets a little feisty and things kick off. So from the intel drops that we're seeing, big picture is ballistic missiles. That's the number one focus in Iran. The Koramasher 4, those are likely in underground bunkers or trying to hide them. And those are ballistic missiles that could reach out and touch Israel, could reach out and touch U.S. bases in the area. And they're claiming that they could hit Israel in under 10 minutes flat with those weapons. They've also added thousands of strategic drones. So think suicide-style kamikaze drones like Shahed 136s, and then even recon birds to spot targets, and then combat variants that are going to pack weapons as well. It's going to be one of their major focuses. And then even cyber threats is something that we'd likely see out of Iran as well. But the swarming tactics, that's going to be the biggest thing. Mobile sites, overwhelming the enemy's defenses is going to be their number one goal. And in this case, the enemy is going to be Israel and the US. So their number one goal will be to overwhelm the defenses there, maybe even mixing in decoys to try to confuse radars. And then on the naval side, we've seen them probe the USS Abraham Lincoln with that Shahed 129 drone that got shot down by the F-35. They're going to threaten the Straits of Hormuz. Again, as you can see, little playbook that Iran has. Weird, huh? Iran, the same thing keeps happening. Interesting. But again, that playbook is going to center around drones and ballistic missiles. That's going to be one of their biggest focuses. And then beefing up their defenses. The S-300 system, Russian surface-to-air missiles, that's their big focus. China and Russia doing cargo flights into Iran. Who knows what they were dropping off? Likely, if I was a betting man, I would say something to beef up the IADs, the integrated air defense systems of Iran itself, and then protect it with saturation attacks with drones. That's going to be the biggest focus when it comes to Iran protecting the regime. But what would the U.S. do? So let's flip to the U.S. side on what we could see should things go hot. So the U.S. obviously has F-35s in the region. Those things are pros at defeating air defenses. So integrated air defenses being struck down. It's one of the things that the F-35 does incredibly well, along with the EA-18G Growler. So teaming up that Growler with the F-35, now you have the ability to go in and pinch the IADs, the integrated air defense systems of Iran, and try to take them down before any strikers come in. And the striker aircraft would be F-18s, A-10s, F-15Es, doing strike packages with pre-planned missions, likely taking down command and control nodes for the Ayatollah's regime himself. That F-15E Strike Eagle would be busy. It'd be loaded down with anti-drone rockets. So anti-drone rocket pods, likely 30 to 60 anti-drone rockets on each F-15E, going down, trying to strike the different drones that would be launched towards U.S. bases in Israel. And then also, after that first wave, what we would likely see would be fleets of MQ-9. So fleets of MQ-9s doing ISR, because you got to see what's going on in the country. So if you take down the Ayatollah, you got to pay really close attention now to who's going to take hold. Who's going to have power now? Because that power vacuum isn't just going to sit there vacant for a long period of time. Someone is going to fill it. Some group is going to fill it. So you want to keep Al-Qaeda, some of these sketchy groups, you just want to keep them out of there, keep them from getting a foothold there as well. So having those MQ-9s, having fleets of those overhead, trust but verify, right? So let's verify what's going on with the IRGC. Let's verify what's going on with some of these top level commanders. And that, again, that ISR piece would be huge, but this would be a wild situation. It would be weeks, in my opinion, to try to get stability in Iran should the Ayatollah be removed. It wouldn't just be a one and done. And that is just because of how deep this dude has embedded himself into the different proxy armies, basically initiating proxy armies around the globe. But we don't know what tricks are up the Ayatollah's sleeve, but there's going to be lots of different systems to counter that. So we talked about the waves of fighter jets. Also, JASSMs, those are joint air-to-surface standoff missiles, stealthy cruise missiles, infrared guidance. Those things are very capable. They can use AI to target, and then you team that up with naval assets that are in the region. We're talking Tomahawk weapons. So having these Tomahawks that could launch off, they've got 1,000-mile range, 1,000-pound warhead, highly capable, going in, striking C2 structures, command and control, places that the Ayatollah does not want to get hit. Bottom line at this point. And then it's all going to be linked together by link 16, which is going to allow all the different systems, all the different weapons to actually talk to each other, which is huge. So yeah, there's options, right? Should things go kinetic, there's tons of different options that the US would have. But let's talk about the ripple effects. There's always going to be ripple effects. So I like to call this the 4D chess section, if you've watched a few of my videos. But in this case, proxy armies would be at the heart of what the Ayatollah initiates. Proxy armies in Yemen, Iraq, Lebanon, creating power vacuums and ethnic blowups, basically trying to do everything he can to cause mayhem around the globe. That's going to be the number one focus. So deterrence from that would be special operations forces, pretty much all the countries in the region being prepared for just wild situations with terror groups coming in, sleeper cells being initiated. That's going to be the biggest thing, is just protecting the world's population from the different terror groups that the Ayatollah has been threatening on the world for decades. But let's talk about a hypothetical situation about how this could go down. So let's say at the end of the day, the talks don't work out. Now, ideally they do, right? Ideally the talks work out, but ideally the talks would include, all right, you can stay in power, but you're not going to kill any of your own people. Like, you're not going to kill these protesters anymore. But let's just say for whatever the reason, the talks don't work out, and then all of a sudden things go kinetic. You know, both sides exchanging different kinetic options. I mean, you could argue it already has. With the drone being launched towards the USS Abraham Lincoln, what do you guys think that thing was going to do? I mean, it might have just tried to fly over it and get some propaganda, because if they got that footage and those videos, then that'd be great propaganda for the Iranian Republic regime. But at the end of the day, let's say they launch a fleet, a whole volley, a massive swath of drones headed towards the carrier. Now you've got a decision to make. So at that point, you likely get as many jets airborne as you can. You could use microwave systems that are on the carrier itself to try to take down some of those drones. And then you have EA-18G Growlers that are up there to do what's called electronic attack. Now, electronic attack is massive. Also, the EA-37B, an aircraft that can also do electronic attack. That's a modified Gulfstream. So you team that up with the EA-18G, and now you have the Gulfstream, the EA-18G, all executing electronic attack against those drones. That's going to be massive. That's going to be one of the biggest parts. But the ballistic missile side of this is something that Iran is really going to focus on. So they're going to focus on launching these ballistic missiles and trying to hit U.S. interests, trying to hit Israel with these. So shooting them down with THAADs and Patriot missiles is going to be the name of the game. That's going to be huge when it comes to countering those drone swarms. And the E-2D Hawkeye would be airborne. That'd be a system that would be up there ready to pump information to the Aegis system, which is on the actual destroyers and the carrier itself, to know exactly what they're up against. And then you've got that outer ring of fighters protecting the carrier, the middle ring of SM-6 missiles protecting the carrier, and then the close-in weapon systems, those 20 to 30 millimeter guns that can strike down any of those drones that are getting within 2 to 3 nautical miles. And then the F-35s would likely unleash JASSM missiles from about 100 nautical miles away. Those are going to have infrared seekers that could lock on to different targets with heat signatures. They could blast Iranian vessels. They could be striking down any fast boats that come in, and you could be using laser guided bombs to do that as well. You got those SM-6s, again, highly capable, but you don't want to waste one of those on a drone if you don't have to. And then 4,500 rounds per minute, that's the rate of that close-in weapon system for that 20 to 30 millimeter weapon, just highly capable. So there you go. We basically hit a quick wrap up here. We hit the intro on why Iran's preparation matters and why they're preparing for all-out war, the high stakes that could make or break the peace deal. I mean, they're doing negotiations while Iran's launching drones at the USS Abraham Lincoln. That kind of tells you a little bit. It just tells you a little bit about how they operate, about how their mind works. And then we talked about the proxies, how those could be initiated as well. And then we talked about the F-35 and the Growler actually punching in and doing what it needs to do to protect the USS Abraham Lincoln. Where do you think we go from here? What situation do you think we see play out in the next week to couple weeks? Would love to hear what you have to think. Let me know in the comments below. Follow me on X, follow me on Instagram, and then watch another video that pops up right here. That's the best compliment you can give me. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Appreciate it. I'll be back in the studio here in the next few days. Thanks for watching. I've got some cool things going on with Joby. They're an electric air taxi company. They fly electric air taxis that can transport people incredibly efficiently, very fast, and they're very cool looking. I got to check out the whole factory. More coming on that a little bit later down the road. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you in the next video. Just watch the next video that pops up right here. This is Ryan, also known as Max Afterburner, signing off.